the exterior of the new Supra, this is based on the FT1 concept, loosely, because of course when you look at them side by side, you're like, what the hell happened here? And I'll tell you what happened. You have crash regulations and you have cost constraints, because the Supra is about being somewhat affordable. You make something more exotic like that, well, you're looking at $80,000 to $100,000. And when you look at this as a whole, especially when you see it in person, and you have to look at it in person. I chose yellow because it doesn't hide any of the lines. You can appreciate a lot of what they're trying to do here. Now, here's the thing. There are fake vents all over this thing. And that was the first thing I asked Tada-san. Did you guys really build this from the start to account for upgrades later on? And the truth is, this front vent, the front grille, the little scoops in the side, around the door panel in the back, they're all plugged up. But it's designed to be removed, and it's designed to be removed for brake ducts, for a transmission cooler, which there are bungs or holes in the transmission to run the lines. There's a spot for an oil cooler, so you can run lines for that. And there's so much thought to what's gonna go on in the future with this car, unlike the 86 or FRS, which was kind of like, well, here's the car, let the aftermarket deal with it, and we're not doing anything else with it. So they have a lot of plans for this over the course of its life cycle, which my guess is probably over 6 years. And again, you're gonna do that, and then you're probably gonna modify this, but even if you don't, there's a lot to appreciate. Let's get on the inside. All right, let's get on the inside here. First thing you're gonna notice is this roof line. Some people complain that are tall, they hit their head on it. And I hit my head with a helmet only. Other than that, I got used to it. Because truthfully, this is a sports car. I kind of expect a tighter cabin. And let's talk about that. With the doors closed, you feel like you're more fitted in here. It feels like there's less room than the 86 or the BRZ, whatever you want to call it. And they had that here, and I was able to drive it back to back. That's where you notice it the most. And a lot of the reasons why they confined the sill space here or thicken this is for structural rigidity. They didn't want to sacrifice there. And to make it cut around the driver to give you more occupant room with the frame, it increases weight because of the complexity of the structure. So that's why they chose to do this the way that it is. And of course, if you're looking for this car, it's again, one of those things you have to get on the inside to figure that out. All right, what's Toyota in here? Aside from this logo on the steering wheel and some of the things that say Supra, it's all BMW. From the knobs, buttons, switches, the HVAC controls are all BMW. The digital shifter, the safety buttons, the infotainment is pure BMW iDrive. And that's it. The only thing that a trained person could see is they have a JBL audio system in here, which is what Toyota uses, but it's Harman, which is now owned by Samsung, so it's pretty much the same in every car anyway. The rest of the things that you're going to think about is visibility. When you look at the outside of it, you can see the way that the windows are shaped, the roof design is, it looks really good from certain angles. But when you're driving it, namely when I had this on track, you go over blind corners or blind turns, you constantly are moving your head around to see out of this car. And I think that's one of the few major compromises they had to do to go for the more stylish approach. And this is something you didn't have to deal with the last generation Supra because there was just so much glass. They're different generation cars. Now, the gauge cluster is unique here because this is definitely Toyota inspired. You have a digital tachometer right in the middle that has some backlighting, and then the rest of the screens are pretty intuitive. And on track, I found it was super useful. But enough of the interior space. I'm gonna cover this in a full review. Let me get it on track and tell you and walk you through some of the good and the bad about it. Oh yes, I'm setting off in the new Supra, and this is really my first impressions. I had some recon laps in the Toyota 86, of course, and now it's time to give you my first impressions of this. Well, when you get behind the wheel of this, the problem with the 86 was everybody said the first thing, well, it feels good, but it has no power. And I think 90% of that has been resolved here. And then in terms of the automatic transmission, as you would expect from this ZF, the way they have it programmed, I know that there's a lot of people that want a manual trans in this car, and I think, you know, obviously it needs it, but this is definitely going to be one of the best auto trans experiences you're going to get into at any affordable level, truthfully. It's super responsive here, which I'll kind of show you. The brakes, you know, this has been beat on pretty much all day here, and you can tell that the pedal travel is getting a little bit longer, but it's not one of those where you're like, oh, I'm gonna die. You can manage it, you still get feedback, and I think with a really good set of track pads and real fluid, obviously, this is gonna be more than what most people are gonna be capable of driving. And yes, you can make this thing go sideways at the drop of a hat. There's just, it's zero effort to do that. So you don't have to worry about, well, is there enough power to throttle oversteer? No, it's gonna throttle oversteer anytime you're driving this. Obviously, I'm on a track, and with track, you have the sport mode setting for the track dampers, and I feel like just getting around here, it feels really natural. This is not the perfect pavement surface. There's a lot of changes in camber, and what you get is a lot of feedback. I mean, it doesn't beat you up. It's comfortable. The car moves around enough where you can understand what's happening while you're driving. And the best part is, this is, I don't know, you know, you think about M cars, and I've driven BMW M cars, and you have to compare it to that in terms of like what this is trying to do, or a Porsche like a Cayman, and this feels way lighter. To me, it feels like the car has way more feedback. It feels more agile, I guess. You know, Tada-san said, well, it feels Japanese when you drive it, and I have to agree with that. It's really easy to set this car up with just a little dab of the brakes, let it settle in. There's a little bit of body roll just there enough to help you know what the chassis is doing and when. So it's approachable in that regard. It's not ultra stiff where it's bouncing around and, you know, you feel like you're gonna lose it over every little bump. But it's I know you can tell that they spent a lot of time tuning this because so many people are gonna complain about it. This is a really serious car, at least on track. And this is my first time out on this truck. I've never been on here before at Summit Point. Of course, did you race this? But this is a real technical exercise, and I think this car could use a little bit more space to run around in. So this would be at home at a tight circuit like this, or something that has more straights like Road Atlanta, or of course something like Road America. I could even see myself enjoying. Final thoughts on the new Toyota Supra. First off, I'm extremely grateful that I was one of the first people to drive this vehicle at the press launch. So thanks to Kurt, Jennifer, and Zach for making that happen. But the other side of this is when you're flown in, put up at a nice hotel, fed, boozed, and you have a brand new car on a race track to drive, and there's all the energy from all the other excited automotive enthusiasts, it kind of clouds your judgment. And that's one of the reasons why I kind of held off on releasing this video. The second part was I wanted to drive the new Z4 on track in autocross and the new M2 competition. And I've done that now. And here it is. I've driven M cars, I've driven BMWs before, and that is the closest thing you can compare the new Supra to. It feels like the M car that every single person has wanted really since the early 2000s. It's a dedicated platform. And we talk about this a lot. When you take a regular car, whether it's a Civic, a Focus, a 3 Series, you have a mass-produced car, and then you kind of retrofit all these things to make it a sports car, there is a ton of trade-offs in the way that it feels. And that's one of my big complaints about modern M cars. You get out on the road, and yeah, it feels great, but then when you get out and drive it for real, it's very disconnected. They are super fast, super capable, but there's always this connection missing with them. And the Supra is like that M car that everybody's always wanted. And that's the best way I can explain it. The other part is, because this was a joint venture, Toyota and BMW, they had equal input on how to design the architecture or the platform from the start. So they didn't just go and say, well, let's take a 3 Series, or let's take a Toyota Camry, and then just kind of slap everything together. This was a true dedicated platform to make a sports car, which didn't exist before. The second part of it is everybody, the biggest question that people have is, why couldn't Toyota just make this on their own? They're a huge manufacturer. Why is it so hard? Well, I did a live stream about this a little bit, and I went into great detail. So check that out if you want all the details on it. But the reality is, in our modern world, to make an affordable sports car, a one-off, is extremely expensive. I'm talking almost probably over $1.5 billion to do what they wanted to do with the Supra on their own from Toyota, because they would have needed to design a brand new engine from the ground up because they don't make an inline 6. So you're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars for development on that. And Tadasan, the chief engineer, said probably 10 times more of that to get a factory set up, to get the tooling, to build the car, to crash test it, all of the things that go into building a car. And when that's all said and done, they have to make their money back. So to do all that and to sell a $50,000 car would not have been possible to make it affordable. So that's why this joint venture exists. And that is why they did it this way. They took what they knew was available and the inline 6 from BMW. Toyota has kind of taken and reverse engineered a lot of the mechanical aspects of this car, like tearing apart the engine, looking at the transmission, making sure that the quality was up to standards or Toyota standards, and going back and forth and making sure that this was going to be, as they claim, a reliable sports car that people can beat the hell out of. Now, they say that it is, and that's the big question mark. We just don't know. Obviously, you're going to have a warranty. You're going to have definitely, if you lease it, you're not going to have an issue. But as it stands, this is one of the best, most promising sports car platforms that I've driven. And when I we had a journalist autocross at this Mama event recently where we had like Veloster N, the new Miata, an M2 competition out there, a 370Z, and the Z4. A lot of people ignored the Z4. And I got in it, the first time I drove it, I knew it was special. And yes, it's softer than the Supra. It's not as hardcore, but all the driving dynamics are so good. I have not been in a car like this since it's like a heightened, a better Miata. It reminds me, it's reminiscent of kind of like the S2000. The way that it reacts to braking, steering inputs, the way that you can get the car to turn in without fighting it. It doesn't feel like you're clouded by 10 tons of electronics and isolation. You feel is about as connected as you can to an affordable modern car that they've done. And that's exactly how the Supra feels, and that's why I have high hopes for this. Now, it's starting out at a really high level. And I think over the course of the life cycle, over 5 or 6 years, you're going to see Toyota souping this thing up. You're going to see BMW souping it up. You're going to see the aftermarket explode for it. And unlike the GT86 or the BRZ, it kind of started at a low level. And that car felt like there was so much to do to it to get it to a high level. You don't have this problem with the Supra. It already feels great. And in a full review, I'm going to go over all the technical details, the mechanical parts. but I hope this kind of gives you a primer as to what's coming. Thanks for watching. Take care.
Savage geese. What a waste of skin. Man, we gotta get rid of this guy. I'm gonna show you how, but first, let's tune this Subaru. I think 60 PSI should be good. Yeah, let's go!